Welcome everyone to this channel where I will be sharing episode reviews of that 1960s television show that I enjoy so much, Lost in Space. I encourage you to like and subscribe so that you don't miss each new installment as I work my way through all 83 episodes of this wonderful series. Up next, Season 1, Episode 15, Return from Outer Space. Penny stumbles upon a matter transfer device left behind by the Taurons from the episode The Sky is Falling. Will uses it to return to Earth and finds himself in a small Vermont town. There, he hopes to get in touch with Alpha Control and arrange for a rescue. Unfortunately, everyone in town believes Will is just a runaway boy with a vivid imagination. Not only is he unable to get in touch with Alpha Control, he may not even be able to get back into position to catch the maser beam that is scheduled to return him to his family. Return from Outer Space is a terrific episode built on a wonderful story. That said, as a kid, I remember thinking I didn't like this episode very much. A little like Mr. Nobody, it just didn't feel like a space adventure to me. As an adult, appreciating the quality of this episode, I enjoy it so much more now. As outstanding an episode as this is, though, I probably rank it just a bit lower than most other fans. I'll explore more about that later, but first, on with our story. During the prior episode, Attack of the Monster Plants, nearly all of the Jupiter's fuel was consumed by those plants. Will, Penny, and Smith, and even the Bloop, are out gathering rock samples for hints as to where they might find another radioactive vein. As always, I get a smile out of Smith when he has anything to do with the Bloop.
Stop that! That is the final indignity. Go and tell your father to vent his hostility on someone else. Zachary Smith draws the line at carrying rocks for animals.
Dr. Smith! Dr. Smith, come back here right now!
Fun little moments sprinkled about like this are among the things that can make Lost in Space so endearing. At some point, Penny sees a nest and an egg. They are resting on the matter transfer device left behind by the Taurons. I enjoy the sense of continuity, connecting this episode so directly with a prior one, The Sky is Falling. Recalling John's caution, Penny suggests that they step away from the alien device, but Smith has his heart set on enjoying that huge egg, and he persuades Penny to climb the machine to retrieve it. Now in his hands, Smith lustily imagines how he will prepare the egg with language that I'm surprised got past the 1960s network censors for a show largely targeted at kids.
An egg. A real egg. With this hen fruit I shall prepare a meal that will rival the culinary orgies of ancient Rome.
Debbie climbs up on the machine and it seems to activate. Just as Penny pulls Debbie into her arms, the machine lets out an array of sparks and smoke. Startled, Penny backs up and ends up right on the disc that is part of this matter transfer device. Sure enough, down comes a maser beam, and as it once more shoots back up into the sky, both Penny and the Bloop are taken with it. Back at the Jupiter, Smith is discreetly and selfishly enjoying the immense egg for himself. John and Don emerge from the Jupiter, Don holding a now empty bottle of carbon tetrachloride, and he asks Smith about it. Smith says that he used it to remove a stain, but Don then complains that he forgot to replace the cap and the entire bottle has evaporated. John chastises Smith about this because this is a critical chemical that they use for their food preservation, putting their perishable food supply at risk. I always enjoy when Lost in Space plays a little bit like real science fiction. Carbon tetrachloride is a real thing. I don't know about its use in food purification, but it's a real man-made chemical that can indeed be used as a solvent and a cleaner. About this time, Will and the robot appear, and Will overhears John's comments about how the loss of the carbon tetrachloride threatens their food supply. Also about this time, John discovers the giant eggshells and asks Smith where he found it. Will then steps up to Smith and says that he hasn't seen Penny in some time and wonders if Smith allowed her to get near the Tauron's machine. In typical Smith fashion, he deceitfully denies that they were, but then Will and Smith pack a bit of celery for a snack and along with the robot head out to look for her. Arriving back at the matter transfer device, Smith sets the celery down on the platform and Will begins to grow concerned that the machine may have had something to do with Penny's disappearance. Standing before it, Smith begins pondering the machine's capabilities, thinking that if the Taurons can send themselves anywhere, why can't he? Will echoes his father's caution, remembering that they promised not to touch the device. Of course, once again, in classic Smith fashion, he says that he and Will did promise, but the robot did not. He orders the robot to explore the machine, and the robot does manage to turn it on. Nothing much happens. Smith loses patience, and then he and Will begin walking back to the ship. After a few steps, Smith remembers that he left the basket of celery behind, and he sends Will off to retrieve it. Will dashes back and arrives at the disk where they had left the lunch basket, only to discover that it is no longer there. He asks the robot who, in technical jargon, describes that the celery is now in a state of molecular change, destination unknown. This prompts Will to wonder if the robot could somehow reverse his signals and maybe cause the celery to be returned. The robot complies, and sure enough, amidst another display of sparks and explosions, the maser beam comes down, and not only is the celery returned, but Penny and Debbie reappear as well. Penny remembers nothing of what has happened to her, but as Will picks up the celery, it confirms to him that the matter transfer machine still works. Back at the Jupiter, Will shares with everyone what he has witnessed. With Penny not recalling anything, Will's story is met with reactions ranging from caution to disbelief. Undeterred, he proceeds to describe how the robot was able to communicate with the machine, and that is how Penny came to be rematerialized back on their planet. Then John makes it amply clear.
So am I, Will. Now, tomorrow, Don and I are going to destroy whatever's left of that matter transfer machine. No, not because we want to, but because the temptation to tamper with it is too great and too dangerous. Now, you can go right to your cabin.
And as always, I get a smile out of every little exchange between Don and Smith.
Beam hit the celery, broke down its molecular structure, and it was gone. Really? Oh? That boy has an extraordinary imagination. He knows perfectly well the Tauronic box of tricks is totally out of commission.
And how would you know that?
Well, it's a perfectly logical assumption.
Nothing's logical where you're concerned, Smith.
You and I will never be friends, Major.
That is the first logical assumption you've ever made.
That night, while lying in bed, Will is stewing over John's promise to destroy the machine, especially when Will starts to consider what that device could possibly mean to our stranded colonists. Will hopes that a sign might persuade John and Don to avoid destroying the machine, especially as, with the robot's help, he hopes to send himself back to Earth and needs the machine still intact to be able to make the return trip. It is 8 o'clock in the morning when Will instructs the robot to send him to Earth. He orders the robot to remain in position by the machine and return him back to that spot at 12 noon. Will takes his place on the platform and checks his watch as the robot begins communicating with the matter transfer machine. Will realizes, though, that he left his lunch by the machine and wants to run back for it, but the robot advises him that the transfer process is already underway. Indeed, amidst another spectacular array of sparks and explosions, the increasingly fragile machine calls down a beam that scoops Will away. In moments, we see that beam come down from the sky again in another location, and suddenly Will is on a snowy rooftop in what we will learn later is Hatfield's Four Corners, Vermont. He slips on the snow, causing it to dump down on a young man below, Davy Sims. As Will climbs down, Davy says he's never seen Will around before, and they introduce themselves to each other. Will takes out his radio and attempts to call Alpha Control, though assuming that Alpha Control is in either Florida or Texas, it is unimaginable that Will would think he could possibly reach them by radio. Davy, thinking Will is just a runaway, assumes that the radio is only a toy and grabs it. When Will tries to take it back, it falls and breaks. Will asks if there is a phone nearby, at which time Davy says he can come home with him and use their phone. This little exchange between the two boys pretty well characterizes what will be Will's experience throughout the entire morning. At Davy's home, while he is in the kitchen, Will tries to phone Alpha Control, but the local operator is not having any of it. Davy, in a somewhat impatient tone, asks Will, would he rather call home or start walking? Will reiterates that he only wants to call Alpha Control. Davy's Aunt Clara emerges from the kitchen with a snack that Will happily gobbles up. Having heard Will describe their journey, the meteor storm, the crash landing, even the problems with their food purifier, Aunt Clara is clearly and understandably very skeptical. Will, discovering that it is now 9 a.m., grows increasingly alarmed about how little time there is left for him to reach Alpha Control. Aunt Clara, believing that Will is indeed just a runaway with a wild imagination, brings him over to the sofa for a chat that she hopes will clear up the entire matter.
Being an astronaut and traveling through space and landing on strange planets. But now you be quiet, Davy. Now, I remember the Robinson family very well. They were the first family in space. I guess we all remember how exciting it was when they took off last year. Oh, seems like such a long time ago now.
If I could just...
Things happen so fast in the world today. I'm afraid a lot of people have already forgotten about them. Will, maybe if you could, too. Sort of put them out of your mind for a spell.
Yes, but...
And think about your own family. Now, they must be wondering where you are. Why don't you phone them, and maybe they'll come over for you?
The Robinsons are my own family, and they can't come and get me even if they knew where I was. The Jupiter 2 crashed onto a hillside, and that's where it is now. And it can't get out unless a rescue ship reaches them. That's why I'm here.
Yeah? Well, then how'd you get here?
By the matter transfer unit that the Torrens left on the planet. Well, I thought they'd taken it back with them. But the other morning, I was looking for some radioactive minerals, and...
You were looking for what?
Some radioactive minerals for a propulsion unit. Well, that's when I found the matter transfer unit. And the robot helped me to get it working, and that's how I got here on a maser beam. But that's not important. I've got to reach Alpha Control. That's very important.
Will, dear, let's take a drive over to the sheriff's office. I'm sure he can help you reach your family.
I can't reach my family from Earth. I want to reach Alpha Control.
Well, he'll help you do that, too. Much easier than I can.
Aunt Clara, as played by Rita Shaw, is a real endearing character, someone that we probably all can recognize from our own lives, and I enjoy this scene with her. While we all know that this is the real Will Robinson, and that his story is true, after you hear Will describe everything to Davy and Aunt Clara, it's easy to understand why they, and everyone else Will is about to meet, can't imagine him as anything other than a runaway playing pretend. Over at the sheriff's office, Will is met with even more disbelief. Even a reporter in the room thinks Will's story would be nothing more than a little human interest filler for his paper. With only 2 hours left, Will continues to urgently plead for an opportunity to call Alpha Control. While the sheriff suggests that he'll be able to make his call, he clearly has other plans for Will. After the sheriff and Will step outside, the reporter has an interesting, if not prophetic, comment to share with Clara.
It sure would be funny if I put his story in the weekend edition and it turned out to be true. I guess maybe I better call Alpha Control, just to make sure that it's not.
Oh, I think that's a very good idea, Mr. Lacey.
In fact, you know, I'm going to do more than just write a weekend filler on it. I'm going to urge parents to make sure that their children don't take this science fiction that they've been reading too seriously. It could have mighty serious consequences if a boy really believes that he's from outer space.
I'm sure it would do a lot of good, Mr. Lacey. If the boy's story really is a fairy tale.
The sheriff tells Will to wait with some other boys until a bus is ready to leave. He then steps to the side to speak with someone else from the town, Ruth. Here, we are introduced to Sheila Matthews, the woman who would later become Mrs. Irwin Allen. Sheila will appear 2 more times throughout the series, in Space Vikings and Princess in Space. Those are 2 episodes that I rank very lowly, so it's no surprise when I say her performance here in Return from Outer Space is the most credible of the 3. As Ruth and the sheriff step away, it is revealed that this bus is for homeless or foster boys. Back on what Will is now referring to as pre-Planus, we see John and Don approaching the matter transfer device. They discover the robot in position by the machine. John sees Will's sign on the machine, which only angers him over Will's unwillingness to obey orders. Don states the obvious, that you can't really blame him, as this machine must be irresistible to a boy like Will. Don is determined to quickly begin the destruction of the matter transfer device. He instructs the robot to return to the ship, but the robot refuses, saying that all programming is preempted and that he must maintain his position.
Let's get this robot out of the way and knock that thing off. Okay, robot. About face and back to camp. And as your good friend, Dr. Smith, would say, no dawdling on the way.
Compliance not possible. All systems preempted. Fixed position must be
You hear me say so often how I enjoy the Don-Smith dynamic. Here, we have a little exchange between Don and the robot. Even though Smith is only referenced by Don, it is a scene that simply makes me smile, even when Smith isn't actually a part of it. Just then, John discovers Will's lunch by the machine. Don once more looks to get to the destruction of the Toron machine, but John wonders about Will. He knows he would not leave his lunch lying around while they are all on short rations. Without completing his sentence, Don now also begins to wonder if maybe Will used the device to transfer himself somewhere. John wisely says that he doesn't know what to think, and they should be sure to find Will before taking any action on the machine. As the 2 men step away, Smith emerges from behind the machine. He begins to engage with the robot, intending to have the robot delete any recollection of Smith having something to do with the matter transfer machine. The robot again refuses, saying that it is imperative that he remain at his position. At this, Smith pulls out his power pack, saying that is a little imperative the robot did not bargain for. Wanting to ensure that the robot cannot bear what Smith describes as false witness against him, he does a little reprogramming, putting the robot's mission and Will's return at risk. While impatiently waiting for the bus, unaware of the nature of the bus or where he's about to be sent, Will finds himself enduring some ridicule by the other boys. Once he turns the table on the kid who is sort of the ringleader, that boy, who we will see again in the episode The Promised Planet, declares that the entire Robinson family is dead, skeletons floating in space, to which Will reacts violently.
I know that's stupid, but this guy's not one of them Robinsons, that's for sure.
Yes, I am.
Hey, will you give me your autograph, please? Did you hear that, fellas? We got the real, genuine Will Robinson with us today. All right, Jupiter. What's a stellar interferometer?
It's an instrument for measuring the diameter of stars.
All right. How many miles in a parsec?
19,150,000.
Hey, how far is it to Alpha Centauri?
5.3 light years.
Well, he could have learned all that stuff from a comic book.
Except I didn't, and I'll bet you don't even know what a Doppler effect is.
Well, sure I do. It's kind of a rainbow.
You call that a scientific answer? He got that from a comic.
Look, you ought to be ashamed of yourself for wearing that spacesuit. The real Will Robinson is dead. So are his folks. Everybody knows that. They're all dead. Everyone that was on that ship's dead. They're skeletons floating around in space. Like...
They're not
Who started this?
He did. He jumped on me.
He said my folks were dead!
Well, what difference does it make to you anyway? You're not a Robinson.
I have to make a phone call.
On Earth, the sheriff and Ruth bring Will before the town council to decide what to do with and about him. It's an interesting scene. We know this is the real Will Robinson, and it can seem crazy that no one will at least allow the poor boy to make a phone call. However, Ruth's question of Will now, and the awkwardness of his response, does help to rationalize why no one in town might believe him. And the hushed statements among the council are not entirely without some merit.
Will, would you just tell us once again? You said you got here on a beam from,
Pre-Planus.
Yes, Pre-Planus. And that you want Alpha Control to send a rescue ship. But what I don't understand is why your father let you make the, journey instead of coming himself.
Well, because I decided to do it on my own. And he wasn't too keen on letting anyone go near the matter transfer unit anyway.
I see.
Now can I make that phone call?
Hatfield Four Corners will be the laughing stock of the whole country if we let that boy make that call.
While those exchanges are going on, Will sees an opportunity to slip away. He steps outside just as the bus with the boys drives off. He runs to a general store across the street and asks the shopkeeper if he can make a call. The shopkeeper agrees, though that is only until he hears that this is going to be a long-distance call. We are, after all, back in the day when we paid individually for long-distance phone calls. In despair, Will believes that by now, there is no longer enough time to get in touch with Alpha Control anyway. But just then, he sees a bottle of carbon tetrachloride on the shelf. He grabs a bottle and tells the shopkeeper to put it on his father's account, but things don't go quite as planned. It's easy to tell that this clip went through some unfortunate editing. When the sheriff says Will did something he can understand, he next called Will a thief. But the network suits didn't like that, and it was cut, leading to a scene that plays a little bit awkwardly.
That street. Yeah. Hey, wait a minute! Looks like you finally did something I can understand. You're a runaway and...
No, please give it back. They need it on the planet for the purifier.
Will ends up locked in Davy's bedroom. Aunt Clara brings up some lunch and tries to address Will in a very warm and maternal manner. Will, however, is angry. He's not only upset about not being permitted to make his call, now it looks like he won't be able to get back up on the roof in time for the maser beam to return him to his family on Pre-Planus. With that, he responds to Aunt Clara with anger, to such an extent that it can feel a little bit uncomfortable to watch.
Now, Will.
Leave me alone.
Will, I know how you feel being locked up here and all.
No, you don't. You don't know any more about it than the others. You think I made everything up.
I don't know what to think anymore.
If you would have let me make that phone call from here instead of taking me to that sheriff, Alpha Control would have been here by now. You'd ruined everything.
Will, I'm so sorry. But it's all so hard for me to understand. If only there was some way of knowing for sure about these things.
There's one way you can know for sure.
Oh, what's that, dear?
Well, if you let me be at that roof where I came from, it'll just disappear as soon as it's 12 o'clock.
I'd like to believe that and let you go, but the sheriff said I had to keep you locked up here until the bus comes for you.
Haven't they done enough? The least they can do is let me go back with my family.
Will, dear, how would you like to stay here with Davy and me and be a part of my family? Oh, Hatfield Four Corners isn't very big, but it's quiet and beautiful, and people are real friendly once they get to know you. I'd do everything I could to make you happy, and I know Davy would like to have you as kind of a brother.
I don't want a brother. I don't want to be one of your family. I've got a family, and all I want to do right now is get back with them.
It doesn't really matter to me whether you've imagined those things or not, or if they were true. All that really matters is that you're a fine boy and we love you.
That's no good. It's no good. No one understands.
Meanwhile, back on Preplanus, Smith continues to try to manipulate the robot. However, the robot, fully sensible as to the time, returns to his imperative that he be at the matter transfer device so as to send the codes that will return Will precisely at noon. Smith attempts to intervene, and in a rather dramatic display, the robot fires warning shots of electricity all around him. This startling and dramatic scene is followed by a few more smiles. John, Maureen, Don, and Judy are out searching for Will, and through binoculars, they see the robot essentially outrunning Smith. The film is sped up a bit, and it does look so funny as the robot moves quickly, all while flailing his arms wildly. On Earth, we have yet another warm scene as Davy simply tries to better understand. Though Will remains angry and a bit hostile, the two boys begin to establish a closer relationship. Davy begins to think that, just maybe, Will's story is true. He asks him to share a bit more about what it's like in outer space. Will makes it clear that he just wants to go back to his family, but despairs that it's now too late. Davy says that it's still a few minutes before noon and they can make it if they run. They scurry down the stairs and run out of the house. On the way, Will redeems himself as he calls out a very rushed thanks to Aunt Clara. There's yet another nice little exchange as Will prepares to climb back onto the roof when he remembers about the carbon tet. Davy runs over to the general store, buys a bottle, and hands it off to Will up on the roof. Now we have a race of events. Will looking up, desperately waiting for the maser beam, while the sheriff, Clara, and others start to come for him. Sure enough, as the Toron machine sparks and explodes, it sends the maser and Will suddenly disappears. There is yet another little fun exchange among the townfolk, but a much more fun exchange comes when Will reappears on Preplanus. I love John's astonished realization that Will not only has a bottle of carbon tet, but that it came from Hatfield Hardware, no less. Even better is Will's somewhat smug nod in acknowledgement.
Well, where have you been? We searched half the planet for you.
What's happened to the matter transfer unit?
Signal overload. Responsible for burnout.
What signal?
The signal that got me back here, I guess.
Back from where?
Earth.
Earth?
Well, I've been on Earth all morning. At a little place called Hatfield Four Corners in Vermont. They sure are behind the times there. They wouldn't even let me call Alpha Control to send a rescue ship. They thought it was some kind of nut.
Oh, well, I think you better watch that imagination of yours, or we might all think the same thing.
But it's true. I even got a bottle of carbon tet for the food storage purifier.
It is carbon tet. And it's from Hatfield Hardware.
Just then, the matter transfer device lets out one final display of sparks and explosions as it falls apart. This leads us to the scene that sets up our next episode, The Keeper. As always, I will withhold my comments until my review of that episode. So a few more thoughts on Return from Outer Space. This episode is wonderfully executed by all, from the writers to the cast to the production team and more. So with that, I think I'll start with its few negatives. The obvious one, of course, and one that gets universal criticism among fans, is the old-timey kind of town. According to Lost in Space, this is a time when we are freezing humans and sending them out to colonize planets in other solar systems. And yet, everything and everyone in this town looks like it just stepped over from the set of Petticoat Junction. Now, in fairness, as recently as the 1990s when this episode is supposed to take place, there probably were rural towns in places like Vermont that didn't look too unlike Hatfield Four Corners. After all, manual switchboards and operators were still in use well into the 1970s, so while this town can appear to be way out of its time zone, maybe this criticism ends up being a little too harsh for a TV show that was produced back in the 1960s. Then there's the behavior of the town leaders, which can be a little hard to accept, especially given Clara's statement about remembering the Robinsons and their story so well. It's even harder to accept that no one other than the news photographer wants to at least investigate the possibility of Will's story being true. However, these criticisms are probably unfair as well. Would Will have been the first kid to dress up and let his imagination run away on him? And the folks on the town council are right. It would have made them look foolish calling Alpha Control if Will were simply a runaway with a made-up story. It's a bit stunning, though, that within just a few hours of his arrival, the sheriff is already shipping Will off to a boys' home. That said, in the end, there isn't much of a story to tell if the town people don't resist Will's desperation to make his call. Indeed, Will's struggle to get in touch with Alpha Control while the clock is ticking down is the story, and we as viewers can't help but empathetically share in his frustration. As such, we will need to give this a pass as well. There are a few head-scratchers back on Pre-Planus as well. We have to wonder how the robot knew how to communicate with the Tauron's matter transfer device, a wildly advanced piece of technology developed by an alien culture. I have to wonder a bit about the machine itself, too. I really enjoy this continuity that we have such a direct connection to a prior episode. However, I'm not sure the device we see in this episode looks quite the way it did during The Sky is Falling. It seems to be a bit less round and maybe even a little smaller. It's also odd that it's so overgrown and now even is leaning a bit. Have the Taurons really been gone that long? Something that especially bothers me, and something that we will see time and again, is John and Maureen's constant disbelief of Will. Everything Will tells them makes perfect sense. It's certainly at least plausible, and Will doesn't seem to be making up wild stories over and over again, so why this constant disbelief? In this episode, it even happens twice, after Penny returns, and again at the end when Will himself returns. A little puzzlement by parents due to unknown phenomenon makes sense, but John and Maureen end up looking a bit foolish, disbelieving their own children's credible accounts so constantly, something that occurs so regularly across the series that it becomes nothing less than insulting of the children. So with that, let's transition to the positives of this episode, and there are very many. The first among them is the extended cast. More than any other episode in the series, Return from Outer Space features more named guest stars. Each of them have lines and play important roles in the story that help give this episode a more cinematic quality. Indeed, this episode does play a bit like a short movie. Donald Lusby does a great job as Davy Sims. What makes Davy interesting is that he goes through a bit of transformation from being dismissive of Will to having a better understanding and more curiosity. I especially enjoy Rita Shaw as Aunt Clara. As described, I found her very endearing and very maternal. Indeed, she was so sweet and caring that no matter how understandable Will's frustration might have been, it is a little hard to watch him treat her so harshly near the end. Then everyone else, from the sheriff to the shopkeeper to Ruth, to Rachel the operator, and even the members of the town council, that's quite an additional cast for a 1960s sci-fi TV show trying to manage to a pretty tight budget. Moving on, there are often some details that are so small that it is easy for them to be overlooked, but they truly add to the quality of an episode. What I'm thinking of in this instance is Penny when she is first trapped inside the maser beam. She holds up her hands as though she is trying to escape the beam. It would have been quick and simple to have Angela simply mime those actions. But if you watch the scene closely, though, you can see the palms of Angela's hands flatten out. A pane of glass must have been placed in front of her so that she could press her hands against it. It's a tiny detail and is easy to miss, but it absolutely does reinforce the effect that Penny has been trapped inside that maser beam. Of course, it is Bill Mumy as Will Robinson who made this episode. As much as the series fell into a Smith-Will robot formula over time, this is one of the few episodes that really features Will singularly, and Bill does an extraordinary job. He is such a talented actor and is so able to express a broad range of emotions, sometimes with just his facial expression. We feel his excitement, we feel his frustration, we feel it all, and that's owing entirely to Bill's wonderful performance. Of course, what makes that performance all the more impressive is Bill's still very young age. He has repeatedly said that this episode was his personal favorite of the series, and for good reason. I especially enjoy the carbon tetrachloride portion of the story. This was something that seemed incidental at the beginning of this episode. By the end, it becomes the element that not only allows Will to prove his story, but also makes this young boy, yet again, the hero who saves the day, even though they are, of course, still marooned on the planet. I always enjoy Will's smile back at John and Maureen as they come to realize that he has indeed spent that morning back on Earth. I have one last thought about Return from Outer Space, and it's this. Maybe more than any other, this episode presents a lot of what-if questions. What if Will had gotten in touch with Alpha Control? We hear that representatives from Alpha Control are on their way to Hatfield Four Corners. What happened once they arrived and heard the story, especially knowing that witnesses saw Will disappear with the maser beam, meaning that his story was positively true? How might the story have played out if Will didn't make it back up onto the roof in time to be picked up by the maser and had to stay on Earth? Or if the robot was not able to send the signals before the machine blew up? Would Will have been able to get in touch with Alpha Control then? This episode leaves us to ponder a lot of interesting possibilities. So with all that, let me give the final word to the star of this episode, Will Robinson.
Well, it's not so different once you find a place you can live on.
You mean it's just like here on Earth?
Well, a person from Earth isn't so different. I mean, his feelings and all. And the forms of life you meet there, well, they're different to look at. And you have to watch out that they don't misunderstand your reasons for being there. But they're not so different either.
You mean their feelings are just like ours?
Well, I don't know about that. But I do know that everything in the whole universe is made up of the same kind of molecules we are. They're just rearranged differently, that's all. And what you have to learn is to translate what they are into what you are.
I grade Return from Outer Space as an A. It is unquestionably a magnificent episode that is so well executed. While an A is a very high grade, I don't count this one among my top-tier A-plus episodes like The Derelict or Island in the Sky. Remember that my grades are based not on quality, but on how much I personally do or do not enjoy an episode. There is no question that for quality, this episode is an A++. However, I don't tend to enjoy it quite as much as those top-tier episodes, possibly because so much time being in an environment that does look like an episode right out of Petticoat Junction, maybe it doesn't feel like a space sci-fi episode to me, even though it unquestionably is. All that said, I rank Return from Outer Space as a very high 15th for the season, near the midpoint among the very strong Season 1. I rank it 29th for the full series, just about in the top third of all Lost in Space episodes. Return from Outer Space is a fantastic episode built upon a wonderful story. It's an ensemble cast episode, making good use of most of the regular cast, and it's stronger for that. Then there is the extended cast of guest roles. Of course, most of all, there is the exceptional performance by this episode's star, Bill Mumy as Will Robinson. All shortcomings are easily overlooked and forgiven, as they are fully overwhelmed by all the good this episode has to offer. If you would like to see the full Lost in Space series, it presently airs for free on METV. You can also still pick up Lost in Space on DVD. Walmart currently sells a box set that includes some wonderful extras, and it's available at a very modest cost. Better still, pick up Lost in Space on Blu-ray. That set also features a number of wonderful extras, including commentary by the cast. Like I said, I'm a fan, and for me, the Blu-ray is a must-have. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on Return from Outer Space. One of the things I enjoy most about sharing reviews like this is how different fans perceive each episode quite differently, and I invite you to leave your own perspectives below in the comments. Most of all, I hope you will come back to join me when I review one of the best episodes of the series, indeed the only two-parter of the series, The Keeper. Once again, I recommend subscribing so that you don't miss each new installment. Thanks for watching.